The candle flame flickered, casting long shadows across the ancient stone walls of St. Edmund's Abbey. Brother Xavier Oakley hunched over his desk, his quill scratching against parchment as he copied the Latin text before him. The midnight bell had tolled long ago, but sleep eluded him as it often did. His eyes, weary from decades of reading in dim light, strained to make out the faded words. At 42, Xavier's once dark hair had given way to grey, particularly around his temples. The lines etching his face told of a life devoted to learning, to preserving knowledge in an age when few could read. Beyond the thick walls of the scriptorium, a fierce autumn storm lashed against the stained glass windows, whistling through the cracks in the ancient masonry. "Still at your labours, Brother Xavier?" The voice startled him. Abbot Michael stood in the doorway, his tall figure silhouetted by the torchlight from the corridor behind him. "Forgive me, Father Abbot. I lost track of the hour," Xavier said, setting down his quill. The elderly abbot approached, his movement slow but deliberate. "What compels you to forsake your bed night after night? The manuscripts have waited centuries, surely they can wait until morning." Xavier gestured to the text before him. "This treatise on healing herbs, it contains wisdom that could save lives in the village. The fever has claimed 3 children already." The abbot nodded, his eyes softening. "Your dedication honors God's work. But remember, a weary mind serves neither heaven nor earth well." He placed a hand on Xavier's shoulder. "There is a visitor arriving tomorrow. A noblewoman from Dunsley. She brings manuscripts from her late father's collection, a donation to our library." "A donation?" Xavier's fatigue momentarily forgotten. "What manner of texts?" "I know not the details. But Lady Joanna Dunsley is said to be as learned as she is devout. Perhaps you will find common ground." With that, the abbot bid him good night, leaving Xavier alone with his thoughts and the howling wind. Morning came too quickly. Xavier had managed only a few hours of restless sleep before the matins bell roused the brothers to prayer. As the monks filed into the chapel, he noticed unfamiliar faces, servants in fine livery, standing respectfully at the back. The woman who entered after them commanded attention without seeking it. Lady Joanna Dunsley carried herself with quiet dignity, her deep blue gown simple yet elegant, adorned only with subtle embroidery at the sleeves. Her auburn hair was mostly concealed beneath a white wimple, though a few strands escaped, framing a face that spoke of both intelligence and sorrow. Throughout the service, Xavier found his attention drawn to her, not for her beauty, though she possessed that in abundance, but for the way she followed the Latin prayers with apparent understanding, her lips moving silently with the words. After the service, Abbot Michael beckoned Xavier forward. "Lady Dunsley, may I present Brother Xavier Oakley, our most dedicated scholar and keeper of the library." She extended her hand, not for him to kiss as nobility often expected, but in a more forthright gesture. "Brother Xavier, I've heard of your work from Bishop Thomas. He speaks highly of your translations." Xavier bowed slightly, surprised at her directness. "You honor me, my lady, though I fear the bishop exaggerates my humble contributions." A slight smile touched her lips. "False modesty serves neither of us, brother. I've brought texts that require a discerning eye, someone who values truth over convention." The abbot cleared his throat. "Perhaps Brother Xavier could show you to the library? The manuscripts you brought can be examined there." The abbey library was Xavier's sanctuary. 3 chambers of weathered stone housed nearly 200 precious volumes, a collection built over centuries through painstaking work and generous benefactors. Tall, narrow windows allowed thin shafts of light to illuminate the dust motes dancing in the air. Servants brought in a heavy wooden chest, setting it carefully on the central table before retreating. Lady Joanna produced a key from her girdle. "My father, Lord Edmund Dunsley, spent his life collecting these works," she explained, turning the key in the lock. "Before his death last winter, he made me promise they would find a home where they might be studied, not merely possessed." The chest creaked open to reveal dozens of manuscripts, some bound in leather, others simply rolled and tied with cord. Xavier's breath caught at the sight. Even from a distance, he could see the quality of the parchment, the careful illuminations. "These are he began, unable to find adequate words. From the east, primarily. Constantinople, Damascus, even farther. My father served in the Crusades as a young man. Unlike many, he returned with books rather than plunder. Xavier carefully lifted the first volume, a beautifully bound text in Greek. Aristotle, he whispered, recognizing the style. And this? He pointed to another, appears to be medical texts. Possibly Galen or his contemporaries. Lady Joanna nodded. My father believed these contained knowledge that could benefit all of Christendom, if only minds were open enough to receive it. Your father was a wise man. And a controversial one. Which is why I brought these to St. Edmund's rather than the cathedral library. Bishop Thomas suggested you might be discreet. Xavier looked up sharply, understanding her meaning. Some of these texts might contain ideas the Church considered dangerous: pagan philosophy, Arabic science, Greek mathematics. Knowledge that, while valuable, could bring scrutiny from those who feared anything beyond established doctrine. I understand, he said quietly. We shall catalogue them carefully. As Lady Joanna prepared to leave, she hesitated. There is one more manuscript. Different from the others. From within the folds of her gown, she withdrew a small, weathered scroll case made of beaten silver. My father kept this separate from his collection. On his deathbed, he made me swear I would place it only in the hands of someone who values wisdom above dogma. Xavier accepted the case with reverence. I shall examine it privately. I will return in a fortnight, she said. Perhaps then you can tell me what you found. That night, after the abbey had fallen silent, Xavier sat alone in his small chamber, the silver case before him on his simple wooden table. His single candle cast just enough light to work by. With careful hands, he opened the case and withdrew a scroll of unusually fine parchment, the writing upon it in no script he immediately recognized. As he unrolled it further, his heart began to pound. This was no ordinary text. The characters appeared to be a form of ancient Hebrew, but interspersed with symbols he had never encountered. Hours passed as he worked, transcribing what he could, comparing it with the few Hebrew texts in his possession. By dawn, Xavier had managed to translate only the opening lines, but what he read left him shaking. I, Joseph of Arimathea, set down this account in the 30th year after the death of our Lord Jesus. If authentic, this scroll predated any gospel account in the abbey's possession. More troubling still, what little he could decipher hinted at revelations that diverged from accepted church teaching. The implications were staggering and dangerous. For 3 days and nights, Xavier worked in secret, translating the ancient text word by painstaking word. He ate little and slept less, driven by both scholarly passion and growing unease. The scroll spoke of Christ's teachings in ways both familiar and alien, emphasizing love and compassion, but also describing rituals and prayers never mentioned in official scripture. On the 4th day, a knock at his door nearly caused him to overturn his inkwell. Brother Thomas, the youngest of the monks, stood outside. Brother Xavier, Father Abbot requests your presence. There are visitors. Visitors? Xavier asked, hastily covering his work. From the bishop's palace. 3 priests and some soldiers. Xavier's blood ran cold. He secured the scroll in its case and concealed it beneath a loose stone in his floor, a hiding place he had created years ago for texts he deemed too sensitive for casual discovery. In the abbot's chamber, he found a scene that confirmed his worst fears. Bishop Thomas's auxiliary, Father Conrad, sat in the abbot's chair while 3 armed men stood nearby. Abbot Michael stood to one side, his face a mask of concern. Ah, Brother Xavier, Father Conrad said, his thin lips curling into what passed for a smile. I've heard much about your scholarly pursuits. Xavier bowed respectfully. I serve the abbey and the church as best I can, Father. Indeed. And that service now requires complete honesty. We have received disturbing reports about heretical texts finding their way into St. Edmund's. Texts brought by Lady Joanna Dunsley. Xavier kept his expression neutral. Lady Dunsley has indeed donated her late father's collection to our library. Ancient philosophical and medical works, primarily. And nothing more. Father Conrad leaned forward. Nothing she might have given you personally. The question hung in the air like the blade of an executioner's axe. Xavier thought of the scroll hidden in his chamber, of its extraordinary contents. He thought too of the stake, where those convicted of heresy met their end. Nothing of significance, father, he said evenly. Some personal letters of her father's, recounting his travels. I've been translating them as a courtesy. Father Conrad's eyes narrowed. We shall see. My men will examine the library and your personal quarters. If there is nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. As the soldiers moved to carry out this order, Abbot Michael finally spoke. This is most irregular, Father Conrad. St. Edmund's has always been faithful to Rome. Then faithfulness demands transparency, does it not? Conrad replied sharply. Or does your abbey place scholarship above obedience? Xavier spent an agonizing hour in the abbot's chamber as the search continued. He prayed the loose stone would not be discovered, that the men would not be thorough enough to find his hiding place. Finally, the captain of the guards returned. Nothing unusual, father. Only books and manuscripts consistent with a monastery collection. Father Conrad seemed disappointed but not convinced. Very well. But know this, Lady Dunsley's father was suspected of trafficking in forbidden knowledge. His sudden death prevented a formal inquiry. The daughter appears to be following his path. Should you receive any further donations from her, the bishop expects to be informed immediately. After the visitors departed, Abbot Michael turned to Xavier, his eyes questioning. Is there something I should know, brother? Xavier hesitated. The abbot had always been fair, had protected the abbey scholars from overzealous church authorities before. But knowledge could be a burden as much as a blessing. The lady's father collected widely, Father Abbot. Some texts contain medical knowledge from Arabic sources, philosophy from the ancient Greeks. Valuable learning, but perhaps viewed with suspicion by those of limited understanding. And is that all? The abbot's gaze was penetrating. Xavier lowered his eyes. For now, that is all I can say with certainty. That night, Xavier could not sleep. The scroll called to him like a voice from the past, its secrets half revealed. Its authenticity remained uncertain. It could be genuine, or a clever forgery, or something created centuries after the events it claimed to describe. Yet if genuine, it represented a link to the earliest days of Christian faith, unfiltered by centuries of councils and political compromises. More pressingly, he feared for Lady Joanna. If she was already under suspicion, her return to the abbey could place her in danger. He had to warn her, but how? He could hardly send a message that might be intercepted. As dawn broke, Xavier made his decision. Taking only the silver scroll case, some bread, and a water skin, he slipped from the abbey during the morning confusion as carts arrived with weekly supplies. Dressed in a simple brown cloak rather than his monk's habit, he might pass for a lay servant or pilgrim on the road. The journey to Dunsley Manor would take most of the day on foot. Xavier had not ventured beyond the abbey walls in nearly 15 years, and the autumn countryside seemed both familiar and strange. Golden fields ready for harvest stretched to the horizon, interrupted by patches of forest beginning to turn crimson and amber. By midday, his legs ached and his feet had developed blisters. The life of a scholar had not prepared him for such exertion. Yet he pressed on, driven by urgency and something else, a feeling he barely recognized after his years of monastic isolation. Lady Joanna's intelligence, her quiet strength, had awakened something he had long suppressed. It was nearly sunset when he crested a hill and saw Dunsley Manor below, a modest stone house with a central keep, surrounded by outbuildings and farmland. Not as grand as some noble estates, but substantial and well-maintained. Smoke rose from several chimneys, promising warmth within. At the gate, his monk's tonsure convinced the guards of his harmlessness, if not his legitimacy. "I bring an urgent message from St. Edmund's for Lady Joanna," he explained. Concerning her father's manuscripts. He was led to a small antechamber and told to wait. The room was simply furnished but spoke of refined taste, tapestries depicting not battles or hunts, but scenes from classical mythology. A small writing desk sat beneath the window, covered with parchment and writing implements. This was clearly a household where learning was valued. The door opened, and Lady Joanna entered, surprise evident on her face. Gone was the formal attire she had worn to the abbey. Here in her home, she was dressed more simply in a green woolen gown, her hair in a long braid down her back. "Brother Xavier, what brings you here? Has something happened?" He bowed slightly. "Forgive my unannounced arrival, my lady. I came to warn you. The bishop's men visited the abbey yesterday, searching for heretical texts. They mentioned you, and your father, by name." She paled slightly but maintained her composure. "I see. And did they find anything to concern them?" "No. I had already secured the scroll you entrusted to me." He patted the case concealed beneath his cloak. "But I fear your return to the abbey might be watched. It seemed prudent to bring this back to you until safer arrangements can be made." Joanna motioned for him to sit and took a seat opposite him. "You risked much to come here. The knowledge contained in this scroll, it may be too valuable to lose." Xavier hesitated. "I've begun a translation. If authentic, it contains an account of Christ's life written by Joseph of Arimathea himself." Her eyes widened. "Then you understand why my father protected it so fiercely. Why his last wish was that it reach someone who would appreciate its true value. But why me? Why St. Edmund's?" A sad smile crossed her face. "My father corresponded with scholars throughout England. Your name arose repeatedly as someone who sought truth rather than merely confirming what was already believed." Xavier felt both honored and burdened by this assessment. The scroll contains teachings that differ from accepted doctrine. If proven authentic, it could challenge centuries of church tradition. Is that not the pursuit of wisdom? To follow truth wherever it leads. Their conversation was interrupted by a servant rushing in. "My lady!" Riders approaching, armed men bearing the bishop's standard. Joanna rose quickly. "How many?" "At least 8, my lady. The steward has ordered the gates closed." She turned to Xavier, her expression grave. "It seems our concerns were justified. They must have followed you from the abbey." "I was careful, but not careful enough," Xavier said, self-reproach in his voice. "Forgive me. There's no time for that now. Come." She led him swiftly through the manor to a small chamber near the kitchens. A large tapestry hung on one wall. Behind it, she revealed a narrow door. "This passage leads to the old chapel in the woods. It was built before the manor, when this was still wilderness. Few know of its existence now." The sound of pounding at the main gate echoed through the stone corridors. Joanna's decision was swift. "Take the scroll. I will claim you never arrived, that I know nothing of any special manuscript. They won't believe you. And when they don't—" Xavier couldn't finish the thought. Women accused of heresy faced the same brutal end as men. "I can protect myself. My cousin serves in the king's court. Even the bishop must tread carefully with my family." She pressed a small leather bag into his hands. "Food and coin. Enough to reach Durham, where my father's friend, Prior William, can offer sanctuary. I'll send word when it's safe to return." Xavier took her hand. "Come with me. We'll both seek refuge." "And confirm their suspicions?" "No. One fleeing monk might escape notice. A noblewoman and a monk together would raise too many questions." She squeezed his hand. "Trust me in this, as I trusted you with the scroll." The pounding grew louder. Time was running out. "The scroll," Xavier said suddenly. "I need parchment and ink, quickly." Joanna looked confused but fetched the items from a nearby table. Xavier hastily copied several passages from the scroll onto a blank sheet, then returned the original to its case. "Take this," he said, handing her the case. "Hide it somewhere in the manor, some where they won't think to look even if they search thoroughly. Keep the original. I'll take my notes to Durham. But if they capture me with blank parchment, they'll be disappointed but have no evidence. If they find the original scroll here, claim ignorance of its contents. Say your father collected many ancient texts, you couldn't possibly know what they all contained. The logic was sound, but the risk enormous. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded and took the case. God go with you, Xavier. And with you, Joanna. The secret passage was dark and damp, descending steeply before leveling out into a low tunnel that smelled of earth and time. Xavier had to stoop to avoid hitting his head on the ancient timbers supporting the ceiling. The only sound was the distant drip of water and his own labored breathing. After what seemed like an eternity, the passage began to ascend. Finally, he emerged into the remains of a small stone chapel, its roof long gone, open to the night sky where stars now shone between scudding clouds. The forest had reclaimed much of the structure, ivy climbed the walls, and a young tree grew through what had once been the altar. Xavier paused, struck by the haunting beauty of this forgotten holy place. How many prayers had been offered here? How many souls had sought communion with God within these walls? Now nature had become its caretaker, and the stars its ceiling. The moment of reflection was short-lived. In the distance, he could hear men's voices, the neighing of horses. The bishop's men were spreading out, searching the grounds. He had to move quickly. For 3 days, Xavier traveled north toward Durham, staying off the main roads, sleeping in barns or under the stars. His soft scholar's hands developed calluses, his fair skin tanned and weathered. The parchment with his transcription remained safely hidden in his tunic, close to his heart. On the 4th day, as he crested a hill, he saw riders approaching from the south, 6 men in the bishop's livery. They had not seen him yet, but soon would. There was nowhere to hide on the open hillside. Xavier made a split-second decision. Rather than fleeing, he walked directly toward them, head bowed in the manner of a penitent pilgrim. The lead rider, a hard-faced man with a scar across one cheek, reined his horse to a stop. "You there, monk? Your name and abbey?" Xavier kept his eyes downcast. "Brother Paul of Whitby Abbey, sir. On pilgrimage to Durham Cathedral to pray at St. Cuthbert's shrine." The man studied him suspiciously. "You travel alone?" "Without permission from your abbot." "I have his blessing." Xavier produced a letter he had written himself, imitating the flowing script of Abbot Michael. "I seek healing for my eyes, which fail me after years of copying texts." The captain took the letter, glanced at it, and handed it back. "We seek a monk from St. Edmund's. One who may have visited Dunsley Manor." Xavier feigned confusion. "St. Edmund's? That's far to the south, sir. I've passed no other brothers on the road." After a few more questions, the riders continued south, leaving Xavier trembling but undetected. His ruse had worked, but it was a stark reminder of the danger that followed him. 2 more days brought him within sight of Durham Cathedral, its magnificent towers rising proudly above the river. Xavier found lodging in a humble inn and sent a message to Prior William, using the name Lady Joanna had given him as a password of sorts, "A friend of Edmund Dunsley seeks wisdom's sanctuary." The response came swiftly. That evening, a monk from the cathedral appeared at the inn and escorted Xavier to a small side entrance. Prior William was waiting, a tall, thin man with intelligent eyes and a gentle manner. "So you are the scholar Lady Joanna's father spoke of," the prior said after Xavier explained his journey. He believed the scroll would find its proper guardian. It seems he was right. "I'm not certain of that," Xavier admitted. "My actions have placed Lady Joanna in danger. Perhaps. Or perhaps this is part of a larger design." The prior led him to a small but comfortable chamber within the cathedral complex. "You will stay here while we consider our next steps. Few know of these rooms, you'll be safe." For 2 weeks, Xavier remained in seclusion, working with Prior William to complete the translation of the passages he had copied. The text was remarkable. It described conversations between Jesus and his followers that appeared nowhere in the canonical Gospels, emphasizing the divine presence within all creation and the equality of all souls before God. These teachings, they are not heretical, Xavier said one evening as they worked by candlelight. They're simply more complete than what has been preserved. More human. Prior William nodded. Which is precisely why some find them threatening. A Jesus who speaks of love rather than judgment offers less leverage for those who would use faith to control others. On the 15th day, a messenger arrived from Dunsley Manor. Xavier's heart pounded as he broke the seal on the letter, written in Joanna's elegant hand. "Friend, the storm has passed. The bishop's men found nothing of consequence and have withdrawn their accusations, though not their suspicions. My cousin at court has ensured no further action will be taken without royal approval, which will not be forthcoming. The treasure remains secure. When the winter eases, wisdom calls for reunion. With hope, J." Xavier read the letter twice, relief washing over him. She was safe. The scroll was safe. And she had found a way to invite him back without explicitly saying so. Prior William read the message over his shoulder. "It seems you'll be returning south when the weather permits." "Yes," Xavier said, realizing he had already made his decision. "But not to St. Edmund's." "Not immediately." "Oh? And where will you go?" Xavier thought of the forgotten chapel in the woods, open to the stars. He thought of ancient words preserved against all odds, carrying truth across centuries. Most of all, he thought of Joanna, her intelligence, her courage, her faith in him. To Dunsley Manor. There is work to be done there, a complete translation to finish, ancient wisdom to preserve. He paused. And perhaps a new chapter of my own life to begin. Prior William studied him thoughtfully. "You speak of leaving the abbey? Your vows?" "I speak of following truth wherever it leads," Xavier said, echoing Joanna's words. "The scroll teaches that God dwells not just in churches and monasteries, but in the human heart. In love and wisdom freely shared." The winter months passed slowly. Xavier remained at Durham, studying and praying, preparing himself for the journey ahead. He wrote to Abbot Michael, explaining his absence and his intention to seek a different path. The reply was both sad and understanding. The abbot had always recognized something different in his scholarly brother. When spring finally arrived, painting the countryside in fresh green, Xavier set out southward. This time he traveled openly, dressed not as a monk but as a scholar, with proper papers from Prior William establishing his credentials and purpose. The road to Dunsley seemed shorter than before, filled with possibility rather than fear. As he approached the manor gates, he saw a figure waiting, Joanna, dressed in blue, her hair uncovered in the mild spring air. "You came back," she said simply. "I followed wisdom's path," Xavier replied. "It led me here." She smiled then, a smile that promised not an ending but a beginning. "Then let us see where it leads us next." Behind them, the manor stood solid and enduring. Within its walls, ancient words waited to be fully understood and shared, not as doctrine but as invitation, to seek, to question, to grow. The scroll of Josephus had survived centuries of darkness to reach them. Its light would not be extinguished now. In that moment, as they walked together toward the manor house, Xavier understood what his years of scholarship had been preparing him for. Not just to preserve knowledge, but to live it. Not just to study wisdom, but to embody it through love, courage, and the willingness to begin anew. The secret was not in the scroll itself, but in what it awakened in those who received its message with open hearts. Some truths could only be understood when shared. Some journeys could only be completed together.